Before Europe, before Asia, before the word Gentile existed, there was Africa. But what about the ones who would become Neanderthals and Denisovans? Where were they? Who made them? What were they doing before they appeared in Europe and Asia? Today, we dive deep into the forgotten prehistory of Gentiles, their origins, their transformation, and the role Africa played in shaping the world. All humans alive today trace back to Africa, created by Yahweh, our ancestors already possessed. Language and wisdom, tools and fire, spiritual understanding, civilization. They were the first teachers of humanity, the first humans, and from them, the rest of the world would eventually learn. Gentiles did not emerge fully formed in Europe or Asia. Before they became Neanderthals and Denisovans, they existed in wild, scattered populations across the northern and eastern parts of the world. They were initially mute, communicating through gestures. They hunted and ate raw beasts and the inside of animals. They had no knowledge of fire, tools, or civilization. Who or what made them? Many theorists speculate a combination of cosmic evolution and natural adaptation. They were not created by Yahweh like Africans. They evolved in isolation, shaped by their environment and survival needs. Africa had already mastered wisdom and culture. Gentiles were a blank canvas awaiting the lessons of civilization. Before they became Neanderthals or Denisovans, Gentiles existed as primitive beings scattered across harsh lands, evolving in isolation. But where did they come from? Who birthed them? Speculative history suggests they were not created by Yahweh like African humans. Some theories propose cosmic or natural origin, where Gentiles may have emerged from separate hominin branches, shaped purely by Earth's evolution in Europe and Asia, completely disconnected from African humanity, or pre-Earth or otherworldly lineage, where ancient myths and speculative ideas hint that some Gentile lineages may have originated outside Africa or even outside Earth itself, arriving as early hominins who adapted to extreme climates. Also, unknown creators, where unlike African humans whose creation was spiritual and intentional, Gentiles may have been shaped by nature itself, harsh environments, selective pressures, and time acting as their makers. Life in isolation, geography and climate. Neanderthals roamed the cold forest, tundras and mountains of Europe. Denisovans survived in high-altitude Asian plateaus, deep forest and rugged mountains. Diet. Their meals were raw and brutal, large game where possible, scavenged carcasses, roots, and sometimes even cannibalistic behavior. They had no agriculture or controlled fire. Daily survival. Every day was a battle. They had only basic sticks and stones as tools, no language beyond gestures and instinct as their guide. Survival was their only concern. Social structure. Small family units, sometimes solitary, cooperation existed, but advanced communication was nearly impossible. Long-term planning was rare, instinct ruled. Physical adaptation. Bodies were robust, bones strong, resilient to cold and hypoxia, but without guidance or culture, cognitive development remained limited compared to African humans. Lifespan. Life expectancy rarely exceeded 30 to 40 years, threatened constantly by predators, disease, and starvation. Over thousands of years, their environment shaped them, strengthened their bodies, honed survival instincts, and taught them endurance. Yet, without African guidance, their minds remained primitive and culture barely existed. In short, they were mute, wild, and untrained, surviving barely enough to continue their lineages. Africa had already mastered wisdom, language, and civilization, while Gentiles struggled simply to live. Their isolation left them physically strong but dependent, primed to learn and evolve once African humans finally arrived to teach them the ways of fire, tools, language, and spirituality. When African humans encountered these primitive Gentiles, everything changed. They taught them fire and cooking, language and communication, weapons and tools, spirituality and morality. Without African guidance, Gentiles might have remained mute and wild, but with this knowledge, they began to grow, adapt, and build civilizations of their own. Over thousands of years, Gentiles evolved physically, culturally, and spiritually. Neanderthals developed stockier builds for cold Europe. Denisovans adapted to high-altitude Asia. Language, mythologies, and belief systems emerged. Yet, even as they developed, traces of their earlier primal nature remained: curiosity, aggression, and a hunger for conquest. And eventually, some turned against their teachers, the African ancestors who had guided them. Unlike African humans, Gentiles did not worship Yahweh. They created gods of their own: sky gods, sun gods, warrior deities, ancestor worship, rituals tied to conquest, expansion, and survival. Their belief systems reflected their journey from primal survival to emergent civilizations, but always separate from African spiritual wisdom. After being taught by African ancestors, Gentiles grew in power. They committed atrocities against African descendants, slavery, and colonization, rewriting history to portray Africans as inferior, creating myths to justify their dominance. What began as students eventually became oppressors. They turned away from their teachers, spreading lies and covering up Africa's true story. Gentiles evolved differently due to climate and environment: lighter skin in low sunlight regions, distinct facial features and body shapes, blood and metabolic adaptations. Culturally, they built civilizations and religions, but always from the knowledge first given by African ancestors. Their differences are adaptations, not inherent superiority. The Gentiles' betrayal created a world where African contributions were hidden or diminished, African kingdoms misrepresented, inventions and achievements stolen or ignored, lies propagated about the origins of humanity. Even today, their systems dominate, yet the truth of Africa's role survives in bones, DNA, ruins, and stories passed down for generations. So, Gentiles evolved from Neanderthals and Denisovans, initially wild and mute, taught by African ancestors and later turned against their teachers. The truth remains: African humans were the first, the teachers, the originators of civilization, and it is our duty to reclaim and preserve this knowledge. For more hidden histories, ancient mysteries, and forbidden knowledge, like, subscribe, and comment below. Which lost origin story should we uncover next? Thank you for watching. You were tuned in to Review TV with Nadia. I'll see you in the next one.